Thank you. I'm going to talk to you now about the coronavirus bill, which was published on yesterday, Thursday, the 19th of March. It's a huge bill, 321 pages. We've done our best to go through it and provide this summary of the powers, really extensive powers um, and changes to powers and duties in a wide range of areas. I'm going to just give you an overview of what it says. It's coming into force very quickly. Um, it's going to be debated in Parliament on Monday the 24th, isn't it? I think it's 23rd, thank you. And probably get royal assent that evening and come into force that evening. Now, that doesn't mean that each of the changes that I set out for you now will immediately be brought into effect. It's going to sound a little bit like a shopping list. At the end of it all, you'll have a good overview of the nature and extent of the changes that's being made. So, first of all, there is provision for the changes to the registration of nurses, other health professionals and social workers, and both individuals and groups of people can be added to the register and allowed to practice if, either as an individual or group, they are fit and proper and suitably experienced. So that could be a basis for adding, for example, people towards the end of their period of training. And in fact, just as we're recording this, we have seen reported in the press that this year's medical students are going to be allowed to practice to some degree without taking their final exams, because there is obviously a difficulty with final examinations. The Act provides a period of volunteering leave. That applies where the appropriate authority, which can be a local authority, can be the Secretary of State for Health, provides an emergency volunteering certificate that someone is going to volunteer in health and social care, and they are then protected from detriment in their main employment during that period. Changes are made to the Mental Health Act 1983 in two main ways, two main areas. One is for initial detention under sections 2 and 3, which can now be founded on the recommendation of a single expert, and the other is for the powers of courts on sentencing, which again in certain circumstances can be founded, there can be a diversion into detention in hospital rather than imprisonment on the basis of the recommendation of a single expert. Very extensive changes are made to health and social care provision. If brought into effect, immediately when brought into effect, they will lead to potentially significant reductions in the rights of people to health and social care. So section 13 of the Act would remove the duty on clinical commissioning groups to assess for NHS continuing healthcare. Schedule 11 removes the duty on local authorities to assess care needs under section 9, carers needs under section 10, to make an eligibility decision, to carry out certain assessments on children's social care needs, and the duty to meet those needs, save for the purpose of avoiding a breach of convention rights. So really significant changes to provision under the Care Act and for assessment for continuing healthcare by clinical commissioning groups. There are changes made to simplify the process of registering deaths and stillbirths. That's in Schedule 12. There are provisions, interestingly a matter much discussed at the moment, at the time of recording this, this piece, there's power in section 23 for the Secretary of State to require people who are in or closely connected to the food supply chain to provide information about matters which relate to an activity of the person. And in section 14, provision for financial penalties of up to 1% of turnover. There is provision for under section 28, for an inquest to be held without a jury where a jury would otherwise be required on the basis of the notifiable disease regulations. There is a formal power under Schedule 15. I've heard propositions assert we have the power to do that, and various ways seeing how you could perhaps piece that power together from other powers, but a power under Section 15 to close schools, and that applies to all schools, all educational institutions, extends to childcare providers. And then there's a power under Section 16 to make what's called a temporary continuity direction, and that's a power to require schools to stay open. These powers can apply to parts of schools, groups of pupils, so a very flexible and wide-ranging power about schools. Particular provisions about statutory sick pay, national insurance payment, and doctors' pensions. You'll recall the controversy last year about doctors refusing work because of the incredible tax implications that could have, unintentional tax implications arising from moving into different categories of taxation of pensions. And there's provision in sections 57 to 60 for the suspension of local government elections from 7th May 2020. So, as I said, that's a sprint through the provisions that's intended to give you the context of the changes to the mandatory and coercive powers of the police that Dijon has already spoken about. Thank you.